Hello. Hello, hello. It's working, I think. Okay, so hello everyone. Today we're going to be looking at How the Immune System Works by Lauren Sompayrac. Sompayrac, I think that's the way to say it. And I was recommended this book by a friend, and I thought it would be a good idea to finally understand in a big picture way how the immune system works in light of the recent pandemic. So what we're gonna do is we are going to first start off just by looking at how Lauren wants us to kind of understand and how to use this book, because I think that that is novel in itself. Um, it looks like the stream is getting a little choppy, but I think it should be fine if I go slow. So the first thing is that the way that Lauren kind of goes into how to use the book is not by going into depth into every single lecture, into every single chapter, but by kind of getting a broad overview first, and then diving in. And this makes total sense for getting a framework for how you're going to learn. Um, Too many times, textbooks are structured in basically chapters that don't give you an overarching framework to put your knowledge in. And I think that this book does a great job of telling you exactly how to get that framework. So when you learn something, you know it has context rather than it just exists in isolation. And so as we can see here, you can read through, but I wrote how the immune system works because I couldn't find a book that would give students an overall view of the immune system. Sure, there are many good thick books, right? And you might be able to have money to buy those things, but they're crammed with detail. And additionally, there's also review books that you could do for tests if you're in an academic setting, but they won't actually teach you immunology. They're actually going to just review what you already know. What was missing was how the immune system fits together, a book that was presented the big picture of the immune system without confusing and focusing on the jargon and details. You can always go into jargon and the details later. There's no reason not to um, basically dive in and go into those rabbit holes, but there's a time and place. If you have a big picture view, then it makes sense to go down certain rabbit holes at certain times. How the immune system works is written in the form of lectures because it's more of a conversation. And although lecture one is a lighthearted overview, is meant to give you a running start in the subject, you'll soon discover this is not baby immunology. It's actually a concept-driven analysis of how immune system players work together to protect us from disease, and most importantly, why they do it this way. Okay, so we get a basic overview, um, and she recommends here, right? Strongly suggests that you begin by reading quickly through all lectures 1 through 10. So I think we're going to try at least to get through a little bit of lecture 1 today, and we'll see how that goes. Okay? I think that's a good start. And I will be taking notes on the sides here, and you can follow along with me, and I'd encourage you to go ahead and interact with the material in whichever way you like. I love taking notes, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. But if you like to ask yourself questions beforehand and then get the answers through reading along with me, and that's another way. And if you have anything you want to do in terms of discussion, chat should be open. And if it's not, I'll fix it. But we'll get used to this all together. This is just a start. So let's go ahead and get started on the overview. So first things first. The immune system is a team effort involved with many different players. These players can be divided roughly into two groups. These are members of the innate immune system and those that are part of the adaptive immune system. Importantly, these two groups work together to provide defense against invaders. So we have two players here. Let's go ahead and start up here, and we're just going to go ahead with the heads up. Heads up, two. System, adaptive. All right. Cool. Immunology is a difficult subject for lots of different reasons. First, there's lots of details, and sometimes these details get in the way of understanding concepts. To get around this problem, we're going to first start, like I said, with a big picture. It will be easy for you to find details somewhere else. That's funny. Another difficulty in learning immunology is that there's an exception to every rule. Immunologists love these exceptions because they give us clues as to how the immune system functions. But for now, we're just going to learn learn the rules. Oh, sure, we'll come upon exceptions from time to time, but we don't dwell on them. Our goal is to examine the immune system, stripped to its essence. A third difficulty, and so what do we have? Let's go ahead and review what we actually learned here. First thing, immune system and immunology is difficult because of details. Details can be distracting, and they take away from the big picture sometimes. The second thing is that rules are not constant, like they're not constant. They're variable. They're dependent on context. So details, distracting, rules can be broken. So those are two things that let's go ahead and do that. Okay. A third difficulty in studying immunology is that our knowledge of the immune system is very much evolving. As you can see, there's many unanswered questions, and some of these things that seem true today will be proven false tomorrow, and I'll try to give you a feeling for the way things stand right now. From time to time, I'll discuss what immunologists suspect may be true, but keep in mind that although I'll try to be straight with you, some of the things I tell you will change in the future, maybe even by the time you read this. This goes into why rules can be breakable. It's one reason why rules can be breakable, but it's because, and this is with many fields, but immunology is an evolving science. And that means that we have to stay up to date as much as we can to really get a good understanding of it. Although these three features make studying immunology difficult, I think the main reason immunology is such a tough subject is that the immune system is a team effort that involves many different players interacting with each other. Imagine you're watching a football game on TV. The camera is isolated on one player, say the tight end. You see him running at full speed down the field and then stop. It doesn't seem to make sense. Later, however, you see the same play on the big screen, and now you understand. The tight end took two defenders with him down the field, leaving the running back uncovered to catch the pass and run for a touchdown. The immune system is a lot like a football team. It's a network of players who cooperate to get things done. And focusing on a single player doesn't make much sense. You need an overall view, and that's the purpose of this first lecture, which you might call turbo immunology. Here I'm going to take you on a quick tour of the immune system so you can get a feeling of how it all fits together, and then the next lectures we'll go back and take a closer look at the individual players and their interactions. Okay, perfect. So the main reason, what is the main reason that is so difficult? Its main reason is because you can't see the big picture all the time. Because since immune system is a team effort, it requires that you understand the team. Okay. Let's go ahead and see next. Physical barriers. Okay, our first line of defense, obviously, we have skin. It's our physical barrier. And to cause real trouble, viruses, bacteria, parasites, and fungi has to penetrate our physical barriers, right? We have our face and skin, everything like that, and our eyes and all of these things. The main Although we tend to think of our skin as the main barrier, as I just did, the area covered by skin is actually only 2 square meters. In contrast, the area covered by the mucosal membranes in our digestive, respiratory, and reproductive tracts measure about 400 square meters. 2 square meters versus 400, an area as big as about 2 tennis courts. Wow. The main point here is that there's a large perimeter must be defended. So physical barriers, right? Let's talk about this. Defenses. We have defenses, right? So first thing we have is our physical barrier. That is comprised, from what we know here, skin, mucosal membranes. Okay, cool. Let's go ahead. The innate immune system. Any invader that breaches the physical barrier of skin or mucosa is greeted by the innate immune system, our second line of defense. Immunologists call this system innate because it is a defense that all animals just naturally seem to have. Indeed, some of the weapons of the immune system have been around for more than 500 million years. Let me give you an example of how this amazing immune system works. Okay. Imagine you are getting out of your hot tub and you step onto the deck. You get a large splinter in your big toe. On that splinter, there are many bacteria, and within a few hours you'll notice, unless you had a lot to drink in the hot tub, that the area around the splinter where the splinter entered is red and swollen. These are indications that your innate immune system has kicked in. This is inflammation. Your tissues are home to roving bands of white blood cells that defends you against attack. To us, tissue looks pretty solid, but that's because we are so big. To a cell, tissue looks somewhat like a sponge with holes through which individual cells move rather freely. Okay, one of the defender cells that is stationed on your tissues is the most famous innate immune system player of them all, the macrophage. Okay, let's summarize here. So we have an innate immune system. Why is it called innate? All animals seem to have it. I'll say this is first line. This is second line. Ooh. Okay. In addition, right, we have weapons that have been around for very long, because it's all animals have it. That makes sense. The other point that they had is about how bacteria see these invaders and how they see our cells. They see them very differently. Now we're zooming in kind of a little bit, and we're going in a smaller scale, and try to imagine how that is. So your tissues are home to roving bands of white blood cells, yes, yes. And then we have our most famous player, the macrophage. Now let's talk about the macrophage. If you are a bacterium, a macrophage is the last cell you want to meet after you ride on that splinter. Here's an electron micrograph showing the macrophage is about to devour a bacterium. Wow, okay, you see pseudopoda here, or some kind of foot-like thing. You will notice that this macrophage isn't just waiting until it bumps into the bacterium purely by choice. No, this macrophage has actually sensed the presence of this bacteria in his, again, see, look, foot. It has his foot, it's trying to grab it. But how does the macrophage know that a bacterium is out there? The answer is that macrophages have antennae. Antennae receptors. Receptors saying receptors. On their, basically sensors, on their surface, which are tuned to recognize danger molecules, characteristic of global microbial invaders. For example, membranes that surround bacteria are made up of certain fats and carbohydrates that are normally not found in the human body. Some of these foreign molecules represent find me and eat me signals for macrophages. And when macrophages detect danger molecules, they begin to crawl towards the molecule that is emitting these molecules. Okay, so let's talk about right here. Very important thing. What is a macrophage? So what abilities does the macrophage have? It has a sensing ability. Sensing also has this ability to basically extending ability. Extends what? It extends, reaches with foot towards enemy, senses. Basically sniffs out enemy, right? If we think of this like a video game character, right, it has different abilities. And those molecules, do they tell us what they're called? No, not yet. We'll get into those danger molecules later. When it encounters a bacterium, a macrophage first engulfs it in a pouch, a vesicle, called a phagosome. Okay, a phagosome. The vesicle containing the bacterium is then taken inside the macrophage, where it fuses with another vesicle. These vesicles are just sacs. That's all they are. They're just pouches, sacs, something like that. Globules, something like that. And there's two of them in this case. We have a phagosome, which basically is the macrophage's mouth covering an enemy. And we have our lysosome. Our lysosome contains powerful chemicals and enzymes. Think of it like a mini stomach. It has a bunch of stuff in there that's going to eat away at your enemy. And it's literally a sac that it pushes together with this phagosome, with this mouth of it itself, and kills whatever enemy it's dealing with. These agents are so destructive that they would kill the macrophage itself if they were released inside. These are just like our stomach, right? If we did not have our mucosal lining, our stomach would eat away at ourselves. The same thing's happening here. In fact, these agents, that's why they are confined within vesicles. Using this clever strategy, the macrophage can destroy an invader without shooting itself in the foot. The whole process is called phagocytosis, and here's a series of snapshots to show how it happens, as you can see here. So let's talk about that, okay? So we have a couple things. Abilities, right? And we can add these as we learn more about more abilities. We can make it basically this character sheet. We can develop it. And we can also talk about sensing, extending, and eating, right? It's basically eating. Engulfs enemy in phagosome. Phago. There it is. And combines with lysosome. Perfect. This is called phagocytosis, right? Phagocytosis. Phago meaning eat, cytosis meaning of cell. Cyto, and then processes a process of the cell. So eating the cell. It's basically just eating the cell with some enzymes combined with basically kind of like a little package. This phagosome is a package to be eaten. Okay, cool. Let's keep going. Macrophages have been around for a very long time. In fact, the ingestion technique macrophages employ is simply a refinement of the strategy that amoebas use to feed themselves. And amoebas have roamed the earth for about 2.5 billion years. So why is this creature called a macrophage? Macro means large, and a macrophage is a large cell. Phage comes from the Greek word meaning to eat. So a macrophage is a big eater. In fact, in addition to defending against invaders, the macrophage also functions as a garbage collector. It will eat almost anything. Immunologists have taken advantage of this appetite by feeding macrophages iron filings. Then, using a small magnet, they can separate macrophages, fascinating, from other cells in a mixture. So you can really, they don't care what it is. If it's foreign, they're eating it. They do not discriminate. Where do macrophages come from? Macrophages and all other blood cells in your body are descendants of self-renewing blood stem cells. The cells from which all the blood cells stem. By self-renewing, I mean that when a stem cell grows and divides into two daughter cells, it does a one for me, one for you thing, in which some of the daughter cells go back to being stem cells and some of the daughters go on to becoming mature blood cells. This strategy of continual self-renewal ensures that there will always be blood stem cells in reserve to carry on the process of making mature blood cells. Okay, wonderful. So this should make sense, right? You never want your producer to go away completely. So you're going to have to understand that some of them, in this case, that means about half, right? It says one for me, one for you. About half of those stem cells turn into mature blood cells, and the others are going to stay as producers. Those are going to stay as the source for what blood cells come out of. Okay, let's talk about that a little bit. Oh, there we go. We're going to talk about macrophage abilities. We're going to talk about like source, right? Progeny, basically. Like, well, they. So we don't understand, right? Now these are self-renewing. Self-renewing means that their children will become what they are. Half of them, and half of their children will become something completely else. Imagine that, right? Imagine you have a family, and half of half of the children become just like the parents, and that's basically to say, okay, you know what? We believe that these parents are good parents, and they're going to make they're going to raise good children. And then, but half of the other children need to, change and become something that the parents are not. Maybe they're not meant to become like their parents, right? So something kind of like that, where you have consistency in how the process works, but you also have diversity by introducing a variability, right? You get something new sometimes. So that's what self-renewing means. Cool. Very good. Macrophages are so important in our defense that they actually take up their sentinel positions in the tissues well before we are born. After birth, blood stem cells, which reside in the bone marrow, can replenish the supply of macrophages and all other blood cells as they are needed. Wow. As the daughters of blood stem cells mature, they must make choices that determine which type of blood cell they will become when they grow up. Okay, let's understand what we just said. So first, macrophages are very important in their defense. They take up watchful positions in tissues well before we're born. They are our guardians before we're even fully human. After we are born, we have these stem cells, which are great because they can replenish supply of macrophages and even other blood cells. After we're born, they can reside with these blood stem cells. They help us to have guardians, and they help us to have other blood cells that can be carriers, that can do other things besides just eat things. They can even eat specific things, and we'll find out soon how that happens. As the daughters of blood stem cells mature, they must make choices that determine which type of blood cell they will become when they grow up. As you can imagine, these choices are not random and are carefully controlled to make sure you have enough of each kind of blood cell. For example, some daughter cells become red blood cells, which capture oxygen, are carriers, and transport it to all parts of our body. Our stem cell factories must turn out more than 2 million new red blood cells each second to replace those lost during normal wear and tear. Other descendants of blood stem cells may become macrophages, neutrophils, or other types of white blood cells. Those things help protect us. And just as white wine isn't really white, these cells aren't really white either. They're actually colorless. That's interesting. But biologists use the term white to indicate that they lack hemoglobin. Hemoglobin is the protein that makes cells red. Here is a figure showing us some of the many different kinds of blood cells a stem cell can become. This is a great diagram here. You have our self-renewing stem cell, right? One for me, one for you. And now this one for you thing, it can turn into lots of things. It first turns into a bipotential cell, somewhere halfway between a mature blood cell and a self-renewing stem cell. It can become a B cell, helper T cell, a killer T cell, or an NK cell. Additionally, it can become a dendritic cell, which is interesting. A macrophage can be a neutrophil, an eosinophil, a mast cell, a megakaryocyte, or an erythrocyte. So we have 3 distinct stages, it seems, right? We have our self-renewing, we have our bipotential, and then we have our mature blood cell. There's probably more details that we'll get into more later, but this is the start. And you can see that these things are not randomized, as you said. These are not random, but are carefully controlled. So let's go ahead and review exactly what we learned here. What did we learn? We learned that, right, where macrophages come from. They come from these self-renewing stem cells. And these self-renewing stem cells then turn into bipotential right? Bipotential, bi meaning two, potential meaning being able to change. So you can see that. And then last it'll be a mature blood cell. And examples include, like, you can see everything from from what we are talking about, which is macrophages. It can be a erythrocyte. It can even be a dendritic cell. And then etc. There's quite a few. Anyway, let's continue. Additionally, we learned that they're not colorless. Right? This is more of a fun fact. It doesn't have to do necessarily with the whole big picture, but it's nice to know, right? Nice to know that they're not really white. When cells that mature into macrophages first exit the bone marrow and enter the bloodstream, they are called monocytes. Okay, interesting. Now, let's see. So we know that they're descendants of blood stem cells, but now, next stages, right? We're going to say, from mature blood cell, right? They say, then they turn into monocyte. Okay, monocyte, mono one, cell site, single cell. All in all, you have about 2 billion of these little cells circulating in your blood at any one time. This may seem a little creepy, but you can be very glad that they are there. Without them, you'd be in deep trouble. Monocytes will remain in the blood for an average about 3 days. That's fine. During this time, they travel to capillaries, which represent the end of the line for blood vessels, looking for a crack between endothelial cells and the line that line the inside of the capillaries. These endothelial cells are shaped like shingles, and by sticking a foot between them, a monocyte can leave the blood. So let's take a look here. If we can see here, this is what these endothelial cells of capillaries. Let's take a look and see exactly what that looks like. As you can see, there's some gaps. There's gaps for these, and that's kind of what he's talking about. These are the kind of shingle-like things here, where there are a little bit of overlap sometimes. I'm wondering if there's better. No, that's fine. This one's good. So you can see here, this is what he's talking about, or she's talking about. you have about 2 billion of these cells circulating in your blood at any time. And this may seem like a little creepy, but you're very glad they're there. Without them, you'd be in deep trouble. Monocytes will remain in the blood for average about 3 days. During this time, they travel to capillaries, which represent on the line, looking for a crack between the endothelial cells that line the inside of these capillaries. These endothelial cells are shaped like shingles, and by sticking a foot between them, a monocyte can leave the blood, enter tissues, and mature into a macrophage. Monocyte leaves these through gaps, enters tissues, and then matures. That's what it does. Okay, let's go ahead and again, where are we at? We're at monocytes, right? When they exit what? When they exit the bone marrow, and when they exit the bone marrow, then they enter where? Capillaries. And capillaries, which look like shingles, have gaps in between them. And these gaps allow for mature monocyte, mature phagocyte, macrophage, mature macrophage, enters the tissue through capillary gaps. Cool. Great. We have about 2 billion of these buddies all around them, and they have little feet just like we see in their mature counterparts that let them get through those gaps. Let's keep going. In the tissues, most macrophages just hang out. They're sentinels, right? They're guarding. Do their garbage collecting thing and wait for you to get that splinter so they can do some real work. The garbage collection basically means that you might be confused by it. Is just all the cells in your body that, but through wear and tear, they need to be replaced. There's some waste that your body has inherently, even if there's no invaders, and macrophages help to clean those up. When macrophages eat the bacteria on that splinter on your foot, they give off chemicals which increase the flow of blood to the vicinity of the wound. Now you're having that red swelling, right? Because you want more blood flow. Why do you want more blood flow? So you get more of these macrophages. You want more of them to help because when one guy's fighting, right, he calls all of his buddies through these chemicals, and then all the buddies come, and they're all helping out. Well, later we'll see how that response tapers down when the job is done. The buildup of blood in this area is what makes your toe red. Some of these chemicals also cause the cells that line the blood vessels to contract, leaving spaces in them so that fluid from the capillaries can leak out into tissues. What did we just read? Some of these chemicals also cause the cells to contract. The cells that line the blood vessels. You remember these cells, right? These endothelial cells. These things are alive and they move. So in the case where you're having a lot of infection, these blood vessels will contract. They'll get tightened up because of all of these endothelial shingles. So and it leaves space between them so that fluid from the capillaries can leak out into tissues. It is this fluid that causes swelling. You have a lot of the swelling water that was first inside of your vessels now is in the tissue. Why? We will find out. In addition, chemicals released by macrophages can stimulate nerves in the tissues that surround the splinter. Okay, sending pain signals to your brain to alert you that something isn't quite right for your big toe. So we had a lot of things just happen. Now, let's go ahead and talk about, now we're done with descent. Now we're going to talk about action. This of macrophages. They're going to, one, right, signal buddies that there is an enemy. Okay? 2, right? We're going to go ahead and we're going to cause some sweat. We're going to cause some redness, right? We're going to cause some more blood vessels to basically more blood flow to occur to this area. And we had that part right here. Macrophages eat the blood bacteria in the splinter. They give off chemicals to increase the blood flow. Okay. Through increased blood flow. Right. 2, we're going to go ahead and increase the amount of swelling is increased. Swelling increases because blood vessels contract. Now this is important to know. Like there is fluid in your blood vessels, right? In the body, blood's just not flowing everywhere out and about. You might have seen the animation Osmosis Jones, and it looks like, blood's going everywhere in all directions, but that's not the case. Blood will go through only vessels. And inside those blood vessels, you don't just have blood, but you also have fluid. And in the case of when something is invading your body, like this bacterial splinter, you can see that swelling will occur because the fluid that was in your blood vessels is now transferring to the tissues. And outside of this blood vessel, there's tissues. And the contraction of your endothelial cells here, these shingle-like cells, will go ahead and allow for that fluid to go into the tissue. And that's what causes swelling. The last thing that happens is we get a pain response. Nerves are getting excited because macrophages are sending out chemicals that basically stimulates these nerves. And this lets you know, your brain now knows, okay, there's something wrong. You don't want to not know. Pain is very important to know when things are wrong, and uh, it allows you to stop damaging yourself more. So it's very important. During their battle with bacteria, macrophages produce and give off proteins called cytokines. These are hormone-like messengers. You know what a hormone is? Hormone is basically a chemical that sends some sort of signal in your body. Okay, there's messengers which facilitate communication between cells of the immune system. Okay, some of these cytokines alert monocytes and other immune system cells traveling in nearby capillaries that the battle is on and encourage these cells to exit the blood to help fight the rapidly multiplying bacteria. Okay, so cytokines are their alert system, right? Pretty soon you have a vigorous inflammatory response. Okay, response going on in your big toe as innate immune system battles to eliminate the invaders. So here's your strategy. You have a large perimeter defend. So you station your sentinels, right? We've been talking about macrophages as sentinels to check for invaders. They have a couple abilities, right? Macrophages have a couple abilities, right? They have sensing, extending, and eating, right? So they're going to go ahead and use their sensing ability. And then when they encounter an enemy, they send out signals. So we'll add another ability to these guys, right? They can not only sense, send, eat, but they can also I'm gonna actually put this at the bottom because these kind of go together. You can also We can also signal or communicate to other cells, right? Through what? Cytokines, right? Through cytokines. And some of these cytokines alert monocytes, some the other and other immune system cells traveling in nearby capillaries that the battle is on, and encourage these cells to exit the blood to help fight rapidly multiplying bacteria. And where are these rapidly multiplying bacteria? Right, we have two major zones. We have inside of your blood vessels, and we have outside. What is outside? The tissues. The tissues. So that's where we need all the help we can get. In our tissues, you have a vigorous immune response going on in your toe tissue as the innate immune system battles to eliminate the invaders. So here's the strategy. You have a large perimeter to defend. You go ahead, right? We've read this. To go ahead and station your sentinels, and when they encounter, they are going to use their signaling ability, recruit more help. Macrophages then do their best to hold off the invaders until reinforcements, and we're going to learn more about reinforcements. Because the innate response involves warriors, such as macrophages or sentinels, which are programmed to recognize many common invaders, your innate immune system usually responds so quickly that the battle's over in just a few days. So usually it's good enough. Usually these innate responders are good enough for most places, most enemies. There are other players on the innate team as well, besides macrophages. For example, in addition to the professional phagocytes, such as macrophages, which make it their business to eat invaders, the innate immune system also includes the complement proteins that can punch holes in bacteria, and natural killer cells, which are able to destroy bacteria, parasites, virus infected, and some cancer cells. Very much not necessarily the common things that you will face, the more uncommon things. These are so. What does that? Natural killer cells will go ahead and do that, and complement proteins will go ahead and punch holes in bacteria. We will talk more about these other players in the macrophages innate system teammates, basically. Well, I'll talk about the other players next time. Okay, cool. That is pretty good for now. So, like, what? Let's go ahead and summarize, right? What are some key takeaways that we understand? One key takeaway, we can understand that macrophages seem to be quite important. Macrophages have many players that help them out, and then we're going to learn more about them. And the way that we also understand how we make macrophages now. We understand that the way that we make macrophages are through blood stem cells, and our blood stem cells are basically they not only make mature blood cells, but they also make themselves. They also make themselves. Half of them make themselves again. So we can go ahead and say this. Key takeaway. I'm going to go here, and text. First key takeaway. We're going to say that innate immunity is mostly handled by macrophage. Handled by the macrophage. Right? 2. Although team that's basically the main thing, right? We've learned a little bit about, and we also learned about this uh, locations, right? We have two locations. Locations inside the blood vessel and outside and, and out outside outside. These are the tissues of your body. Right. So these are some two good takeaways here. We know now. Oh, whoops. Let's go ahead and make sure that these are all visible. Right. We're gonna see that it's very important. The macrophage we already have, and we also understand that there's two places where these battles are being held. The main battle is being held, as we can see, in the tissues, and where these blood cells are being born are essentially, first they start in your bone marrow, and then they go into your vessels, and then eventually they go into the tissues. Okay, we're going to take a short break, and we can go ahead and we'll follow up with the next section after a little bit. It's been about an hour, so